This took place back when I was just a little kid, second or maybe third grade. The details from that time in my life are a bit fuzzy, but this one memory is burned into my mind for reasons you'll soon understand. It was a weekday, and rain had been falling relentlessly from morning to night. After school, my parents picked me up, dropped me off at home, and then headed to some fancy gathering, maybe a gala, fundraiser, or dinner party. I'm not really sure. Whatever it was, they were supposed to come home that night. But the weather didn't ease up. In fact, the storm grew so vicious that driving back became a risk. So they made the call to stay the night at a friend's house closer to the event. I remember them calling the house phone, apologizing again and again for leaving me alone, but I kept telling them I was okay and didn't need anything. My mom gave me a short checklist over the phone. Lock the doors and windows, leave one light on, and close all the blinds. Pretty standard stuff. Back then, I didn't get why she sounded so anxious. I didn't yet understand how dangerous it could be for a kid my age to be home alone. To be honest, I was actually kind of thrilled. No rules, no bedtime, and a whole stash of candy all to myself. I didn't have a TV in my bedroom, so I stayed in the living room, watching cartoons and riding out my sugar high. I figured I'd do everything my mom asked right before I went, to sleep, except I didn't make it that far. Eventually, the sugar crash hit hard and I dozed off on the couch. I'm not sure what time it was when I woke up, but the TV had turned itself off, which meant I'd been out cold for at least a few hours. The first thing I noticed was how cold it felt, colder than it should have been. The temperature drop was so sharp that even as a kid, I knew something was off. I considered just curling up and going back to sleep, but then I remembered the list. My mom trusted me, and I didn't want to mess that up. So I peeled myself off the couch and made the rounds, checking everything. Front and back doors, locked, blinds, closed, windows, all sealed tight. The lights were on, just like she asked. Still, the chill lingered. I even pressed my palm against the windows to see if one had been cracked open. But no, everything was shut. I chalked it up to the storm, maybe knocking out the heater. Made sense enough, and I was too tired to dig any deeper into it. So I went upstairs, ready to finally knock out. The moment I entered my room, I understood just how wild the weather had gotten. The living room is deep in the center of the house, so I hadn't been able to hear much, but my bedroom had a big window facing the street, and through it I could hear the rain hammering like it wanted to break. Every few seconds, lightning lit up the room like a flashbulb, followed by thunder that made the walls tremble. I wasn't scared of storms, but I was definitely uneasy. I kept imagining a tree snapping and crashing into the house. That thought alone was enough to keep me wide awake. And then I started hearing something stranger than thunder. It was a slow, rhythmic creaking, like old floorboards shifting. Except my room was carpeted. There were no boards to creak. I assumed maybe the wind was pushing a tree against the house or something, but the sound wasn't right. It was too methodical, like footsteps. It kept happening, and the longer I listened, the more it grated on my nerves. Finally, I sat up, annoyed but alert. I scanned the room, lightning illuminating everything in brief flashes. Everything looked normal, until my eyes settled on the closet. It was the only wooden thing in the room, and in that flicker of light I noticed the door had cracked open. Just a sliver, but I was absolutely certain I had closed it earlier. Something had moved it. My heart dropped. I didn't shout, didn't say a word, I didn't even think. I just slipped out of bed as quietly as I could and made my way to the door. That short walk felt like a lifetime, like crossing an ocean, barefoot. I bolted downstairs and crawled under the dining table. That's when I finally let the panic hit me. I started crying quietly, too terrified to make a sound. There was someone in the house, in my room, and no one was coming to help me. I don't know how long I stayed hidden there, but eventually I heard it. Footsteps on the stairs. Not steady steps, though. These sounded erratic, like someone jumping down 2 or 3 steps at a time. Wild, uncoordinated. They got closer, closer to where I was hiding. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't look under the table, and then I saw them. 2 bare, filthy feet appeared right in front of me. The legs were slick with mud and streaked with yellow, bruised and bleeding like they'd run through a thicket barefoot. I couldn't tell if they belonged to a man or woman. The skin looked warped, almost inhuman. They were swaying like they could barely stand, and then they dropped something, a wrench. It clattered to the floor inches from me. My entire body locked up. If they bent down to pick it up, they'd see me, but they didn't. They just stood there. A minute passed, maybe more. Then, finally, they moved. I heard the footsteps wander through the house, chaotic and stumbling, until at last the front door opened and shut. Gone. I didn't move for a long time after that. Part fear, part shock. My brain couldn't process what had just happened. Eventually, I crept out, picked up the wrench, locked the door, and slinked back to bed. Somehow, I fell asleep. I never told my parents. Not right away. I was scared. They'd be mad I hadn't followed their instructions the moment I got home. It took years before I finally told them what had happened, and even then, they didn't believe me at first. In hindsight, not telling them sooner was the worst decision I could have made. Not because they could have done anything about it, but because staying silent just kept the fear locked up inside. That night changed me. I used a nightlight for years afterward and developed a fear of the dark that lingered well into adulthood. I still don't know who or what was in my closet that night. But I do know this: lock your damn doors. I was 15 when this happened. Not a little kid, but still too young to fully grasp the razor-thin line between safety and danger. It was a Saturday night in May, close enough to summer that you could already taste it. I don't remember the exact date, but I do remember the rain. Heavy, relentless, the kind that makes everything feel heavier, like the sky itself is pressing down. I live with my parents in a decent-sized house, probably bigger than necessary, for just 3 people. My mom always jokes that they meant to have more kids, but just never got around to it. So yeah, only child. Quiet house, especially on nights like this. Before I go further, there's something else you should know about me. I've got a bunch of weird health things that make life, well, complicated. Panic attacks, frequent fainting, difficulty breathing, and, worst of all, I can't sleep unless the room is absolutely silent. No fans, no white noise, not even soft music. Total silence. So, when it rains like this, I'm screwed. That night was no exception. No matter how hard I tried, the sound of raindrops hammering the roof kept my brain wide awake. It wasn't even a full-blown thunderstorm, just a steady, nerve-grating downpour that made me feel like I was stuck inside a drum. At some point, past midnight, I gave up. Sleep wasn't happening. So I got up. I wandered around the house for a bit, trying to shake the restlessness out of my legs. Then I got this idea. something I'd done once or twice before. A walk in the rain. My parents were oddly supportive of that habit. We lived in a peaceful suburb and a massive public park bordered our backyard. Between the streetlights and open layout, it felt safer than most places even during the day. I threw on a rain jacket, crept downstairs and slipped out the door. No umbrella, no phone. That last one was intentional. I knew if I had it with me, I'd end up staring at it. Instead of resetting my mind, the world outside was calm. Not quiet, but peaceful in a way only nature can be. Trees shimmered in the streetlights, their leaves swaying gently under the weight of the rain. The smell of wet earth hung in the air, thick and familiar. For a while, I just walked, letting the rain soak through the outer layer of my clothes, my thoughts growing quieter with every step. After about 20 minutes, my eyelids started getting heavy. Perfect. That was the whole point. I turned back toward home, cutting through the park's main path, and that's when I saw it. A shape, lying in the middle of the road just up ahead. Long, dark, and perfectly still. At first, I thought it was a garbage bag or maybe some old piece of tarp, but the closer I got, the more my gut started clenching. It wasn't trash, it was a person. Lying face down in the middle of the road, froze. My stomach churned. Every alarm bell in my head started ringing. There was no reason, none, that someone would just be laying there like that, especially in a storm. My first thought was that they'd been hit by a car and left there. Maybe they were unconscious, or worse. Everything in me screamed to turn around and walk away, but I couldn't. My parents raised me better than that. If someone needed help, I wasn't going to pretend I hadn't seen them. So, heart pounding, I took a cautious step toward the road. As I got closer, I could make out what they were wearing. Dark, jeans and a soaked flannel shirt. Not exactly rain gear. It looked like a man, though I couldn't be sure. The way he lay there, it didn't feel right. Rigid. Unnatural. Then, out of nowhere, this noise tore through the park behind me. A long, shrill, almost animal-like cry. But not quite. It sounded wounded or wrong. Like something pretending to be a howl but not getting it right. Instinctively, I turned around, my skin crawling. But the path behind me was empty. Trees swayed. In the wind, rain splashed in puddles, but nothing moved. I spun back to face the road and felt the blood drain from my face. The man was sitting up. No movement, no warning, just upright, staring straight at me. Something inside me snapped. My vision tunneled and my knees nearly buckled. I felt like I was about to faint, but I forced myself to stay on my feet. Before I could even process what was happening, he stood, and then he sprinted straight toward me. His mouth stretched into a jagged, horrifying grin, and clutched in his hand was a kitchen knife. Until that second, I thought I understood fear. I didn't. I ran. Rain blurred my vision. The grass beneath my feet turned to ice. I slipped, stumbled, pushed myself forward. I could hear him behind me, laughing, shouting something awful. "I'll kill you," he screamed. I didn't want to lead him to my house. I veered toward the trees, even though that scream from earlier had come from there. I had no choice. My legs pumped like machines, driven by raw panic. I don't know how long I ran. It felt endless. Eventually, I plunged into the densest part of the woods and collapsed behind a tree, chest heaving, lungs burning. I peeked back. No sign of him. I waited. Minutes dragged on like hours. Rain kept falling. I didn't hear footsteps, no shouting, nothing. Finally, I worked up the nerve to move. I crept through the park's back path, one that would lead me out, several blocks from my house. I stayed hidden, moved slow, checked behind me constantly. When I finally stepped through my front door, I collapsed on my bed, clothes soaked through, hair dripping, hands shaking. I never saw that man again. Never figured out who he was or what he wanted, but that scream, that twisted, inhuman cry, I still think about it. Sometimes I wonder if he heard it too. Maybe that's what made him sit up. Maybe it triggered something in him. Or maybe he was just a lunatic, high on something, looking for someone to hurt. Either way, I was nearly that someone. A few months ago, not long after a brutal breakup, I found myself unraveling. I needed to get away. From the noise, from people, from anything that reminded me of what had just fallen apart. So, I packed up my truck with the essentials and drove off without a plan, chasing solitude like it was a cure. I've always turned to nature to clear my head. Not the kind of nature where families roast marshmallows 10 feet away, or joggers whiz by on trails. I'm talking about true isolation, the kind of silence you find only deep in the wild. I grew up in Northern California, and over the years I'd learned how to find those untouched patches, the hidden river bends and forgotten roads where it feels like you're the last person on earth. I decided to head back to one of those places, a small, secluded curve of river I'd stumbled across years earlier. No signage, no campsite markers, just a rough dirt road that cut through miles of pine and led to a clearing by the water. I rolled in sometime late afternoon, but as soon as I turned off the highway and down that forgotten path, I felt something shift in my gut. There were already 2 trucks parked at the trailhead, one silver, one white. No people in sight. But knowing someone else was out there instantly soured the mood. I sat in my truck for a moment, weighing my options. I'd come here to be alone, but I told myself the river was long and there was plenty of space for all of us. Maybe whoever they'd set up camp miles down the bend and I'd never even see them. So, I started hiking in. After about 15 minutes of trudging through brush and soggy dirt, I saw them. 2 men standing near the riverbank, rods in hand. Fishing, it looked like. Beards, big boots, camouflage gear, the whole aesthetic. But something felt off. As I got closer, one of them scrambled to cover something with his jacket. Then, awkwardly, he gave me a half smile and said something like, "We're just shooting cans. Didn't mean to startle you." I nodded, but didn't respond. Kept walking. It wasn't the words that unsettled me. It was the speed and weird nervousness in his voice, like a kid caught doing something he shouldn't, like he'd rehearsed the line and didn't expect to use it so soon. Still, I pushed the unease aside. People out here tend to be different. Maybe they were just socially awkward or high or both. I kept going until the path dipped low and disappeared into a tight curve of trees near the river. That's where I set up camp. It was far enough from the others that I couldn't hear or see them, and for a while I felt okay. It started to drizzle while I was unpacking. I pulled on my rain shell, grabbed a book, and settled in, letting the sounds of water, river, and sky wrap around me. It was almost meditative. Later, just before dusk, I wandered down to the rocks by the water to watch the current roll by. That's when I noticed movement on the opposite bank. It was one of the men from earlier, the one who'd spoken to me. He was alone now, standing just beyond the trees. When he saw me, he waved. Hesitant, I waved back, keeping my expression neutral. He shouted across the river, asking for my name. Before I could think better of it, I called back, "Anisha." I don't know why I gave him my real name. It just slipped out. He paused for a second, then pulled something from his jacket. I thought maybe it was a phone. But no, it was bulkier, boxy, a disposable camera. He lifted it. Click. He'd taken a picture of me. Then, without another word or gesture, he turned around and walked back into the trees. The unease that had been simmering all day boiled over. That wasn't just strange, it was predatory. Something about the flatness in his face, the casual way he took the photo. It rattled me. I returned to camp, zipped myself into the tent, and told myself to stay put until sunrise. But rest wouldn't come. My mind spiraled, picking through fragments of the breakup, the silence around me, and now. That man. I lay there for what felt like hours, eyes open, counting every drip of rain on the nylon above me. Then came something else. At first it blended with the rainfall, just faint irregularities in rhythm. But soon it was unmistakable. Footsteps. Careful, deliberate steps on wet ground. Circling. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I grabbed the gun I always carry when I camp alone. No hesitation. I unzipped the tent, slipped out into the night, and flicked on my flashlight. The beam cut through rain and shadows, and there he was. Not 20 feet away, half concealed behind a tree. Same guy. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't scowling either. His face was blank, empty, but in his hand was a hatchet, small, worn, deadly. I raised the gun. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "Leave, now, or I will shoot." He just stood there. Didn't react, didn't blink. Then, finally, he muttered something about a friend, Ivan, who had warned him not to come find me, said he had taken care of Ivan. I didn't wait for more. I fired a warning shot, right, into the trees above him. That got his attention. He flinched, startled. I aimed again, firmer this time. "Drop the axe." And he did. A flood of adrenaline hit me, but I knew I wasn't out of danger yet. I forced him to strip off his shoes, buy myself time if he tried to follow me. Then I had him empty his pockets, one slow item at a time. No other weapons, thankfully. I told him to step back and ordered him to toss my gear out of the tent. I wasn't staying another second. I packed fast, keeping my eyes locked on him. I shoved the axe into my pack, evidence, and ditched the tent altogether. Not worth the risk. I hurled his shoes into the forest and told him to walk the other way. Only once he vanished into the darkness did I start moving. I hiked through the storm. Flashlight kept low, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the wind. When I finally made it back to the trailhead, both trucks were still parked there. I didn't stop. I threw my gear in the truck and floored it. When I hit AEC, patch of cell service, I called the police. Gave them everything. The location, the description, the encounter. I don't know if they ever found him. I haven't asked, but his words still echo sometimes. I had to take care of Ivan. I don't know who Ivan was. I don't want to know. What I do know is that carrying a weapon saved my life that night, and I don't go camping without backup anymore.